There's the back and forth. On the top there's the up and down. See how they're not even touching the actual crosshair mechanism anymore? The crosshair mechanism has slid down inside of my gun so far from inertia that it is no longer in contact with the motion devices. Okay, so what I have pretty much figured out through the dissection of this gun is two very important things are happening to these scopes that's causing them to fail. The topic of this video is Springer air rifle scope failure. Basically, what we have here is a crosshair barrel. The crosshair is inside of this piece and it hinges back here inside of the scope by some kind of rubber grommet. And to adjust the barrel, basically just turning these pins pushes the barrel left or right, up or down. But something very important I noticed right away when I took this thing apart initially is this retaining spring was not positioned 60 degrees from the other two pins. It had moved itself to directly beneath the up and down pin, which meant it had no stability in the right direction. So my scope was just flopping around inside of there. So this retaining spring will ride around inside of your gun. Now there's a groove in there that I'm going to show you after I take this apart again all the way. But basically, this is one of the major components for the failure of the scope. This spring gets to moving around, and that's why you are not staying true, because this spring has to be positioned 60 degrees. And as you can see, it'll just pop right out of there and slides all over. So now, you see how this thing just kind of moves around? So that's what's happening first of all. Now second, when I took this gun apart, let me set this down a second. This entire barrel that I just slid out of here had slid itself down inside the barrel so far, it goes on the gun like this. Your sight tube barrel, or your crosshair barrel, every shot you make slowly progresses in this direction. It advances towards the eyepiece. When I opened this scope for the first time, I'll try and get the footage, it was pointed like all the way up like this. I don't want to cram it back down inside there. I'll just try and get an edited clip in there. But it was no longer even touching the pins. It had flown back in there so far. So not only was this retaining spring out of position, I'm going to try and see if I can get you a clip of this one in the proper position. This is another failed scope. Let's see here. See how that retaining spring there is at a perfect 60-degree angle to these other adjustment pins? But also notice how the end of my barrel is very close to the pins. So every time you shoot this scope, that sight tube barrel slides back and changes the angular hill of the sight. Because if it's in there at any one position, if you advance it, it's going to actually drop in this direction. Let's say the barrel has to be sitting in there like this at an exaggerated rate. Okay, so as it moves back, it actually drops down out of the picture in this direction. Let's say it had to be facing this way for the gun to shoot properly, and it advances back up into the tube like this. That's going to give you an up. So I may try and fix this scope by jamming that back into position. See if we can get a view of this. See how that is scooted way up, how it's just floating in the middle of nowhere? That's supposed to be tight. I'm going to try to push that back down. So it has advanced that far. The crosshair, by the way, is just a really thin piece of wire, which I thought was strange. It's not on glass or nothing. It's one of those acid-etched photo print things. So anyway, that's what's happening. Your retaining spring is gliding around on you. That reminds me, you see that groove? For some reason, those idiots made a groove there for that, which means it can just fly around the race. It needs to have a location pinhole. So what I may do is go ahead and buy another one of these crap Werther scopes sighted in, because it did hold true for the longest time, longer than the Gammo, and it shot very well. So the retaining spring kind of rides around in that little groove there. And I cannot see that. I'm sure you can't. So for some reason, they made it circular, just probably for milling purposes. It's probably easier to just mill it like that. Or bore that out, whatever they call it. So that is where I found it. It was right down at the bottom. And it's supposed to be like somewhere, as I said, like right there. 60 degrees, so that it's pushing up against your two position pins. So that's all there is to these things. Nothing, not as fancy as I thought it would be inside there. I thought there would be all kinds of little delicate pieces of machinery and fiber optic prisms and all this stuff, and it's just a stupid barrel stuck inside a piece of rubber doing this. So that explains it. So here's the plan. I'm going to try to fix this scope, but I'm going to buy another one of these because I was kind of satisfied with it when it did work. Much as I hate to say that. So I'm going to buy another one of these, and I'm going to take some glue and fill in the area, this cavity in between the pins and stuff. I'm going to delicately put glue in there in between that area and fill that whole area in with probably goop, because this glue is kind of rubbery, but it's very strong. And from past experience, I know this will work. I've used this stuff enough to know what it will and won't do, and it would be perfect for that. Epoxies and stuff like that I don't recommend because they have very poor adhesion properties. This stuff has really good adhesion properties with fairly weak cohesion, which makes it kind of rubbery. So that's what I'm going to do. That will not only hold my retaining spring in position, but it will also stop my sight barrel from advancing into the gun. I'm also going to put some glue in this backside here, because you literally have to do everything you can with the amount of energy that's involved with that impact. Impulse is a funny thing. It's not about the amount of energy, but it's about the time it takes to stop that impact. That's where your impulse is in it. It's in the way Springer's impact that's extremely brutal. The explosive properties of nitrocellulose or gun cotton in rifles is picked particularly for its slow expansion of pressure. It's a gradual thing. So the impulse is somewhat low even though the energies are way higher. It's in the mathematics.